His quote was, "Your liberation from any personal suffering is yours alone to work on. I'm just saying that opening up and sharing what you're going through is an important part of the healing process."
Mm.
And the reason I want to go through that is you've mentioned a few times about this vulnerability. It's come up at the start of the conversation today, and it came up in your language. So for me, I'm like, okay, vulnerability. Tell me more. Why is vulnerability so important, and especially for men? Welcome, everyone, to the main journey, a way for you to join me on a learning journey through life. My name is Samuel Main, and today we welcome Dai Manuel to the show. Dai is a super dad who is on a mission to positively impact 1 million role models around the globe to lead a functionally fit life through education, encouragement, and community. Dai is an award-winning digital thought leader and author, distinguished Toastmaster and TEDx speaker, former partner and chief operating officer of a multi-million-dollar retail company, a sought-after lifestyle mentor and executive performance coach. Thank you for taking the time to join me today, Dai. Incredible, incredible journey so far. I'd love it if you could give the audience an insight into your journey through your own words. So, where did your interest in coaching others and in business begin?
Woo! Let's just dive right in. No, Samuel, first of all, it's just an honor to be here. Very, very grateful, as well as thank you. I just want to say thank you for you doing what you do, because we need more spaces like this online to capture these types of conversations and to normalize the topics we're going to be talking about today. Because it's really that feeling that we get because these conversations aren't every day, or at least we're not present for these kind of conversations in our own life every day. They feel awkward, right? We get a little bit like, I know later on we're going to talk a bit about that word vulnerability, and I can tell you my relationship with that word many years ago, not so healthy. It's changed. It's a work in progress, but we'll get to that. And so thanks for that kind introduction. As you can tell, I'm somebody that's, well, I'm a very proud father. Okay, first and foremost. And because of that perspective, when I started having my first daughter, she was born almost 20 years ago now. And my second one was born, she's now 17, almost 18. It shifts your perspective, right? Your identity shifts as soon as you have a child. Like, I don't care who you are, like when you have a kid, because it goes from being about me to then about we, when it's my wife and I, right? And now it's just about them. So in that, and this is sort of just to give some context, because depending on what period of my life, I would have definitely answered your question differently. Mm-hmm. I would. And if I go way back, to just early childhood, where a lot of our earliest habits and belief systems are formed, because a lot of that times, like when you think about it, our brains aren't wired to be happy, but they are wired to learn. And the two most effective ways we all learn is through modeling and mentorship. And so you have to think about, how does that play into our own lives and how we've grown to be who we are today and continue to evolve into who we believe that we want to become, right? And that's a forever thing. I mean, till the day that we depart this mortal coil, like we're always becoming something. And we can either be intentional with that, or we can sort of just let things happen, But when I think back, at age 9, probably the most dramatic thing that had happened in my childhood was that my parents dropped the bomb on my brother and I. My brother, 2.5 years my junior, they dropped the bomb saying, we're separating and divorcing. And, at age 9, again, I'm going to date myself right now. I'm 46 now. So we're going back 35 years. So 35 years ago, mid 80s, I mean, there is no internet, there's no real great resources for these types of conversations, nor support networks for this, because back then it wasn't the same statistic we have with marriages today. The statistics are more marriages fail than succeed, which is startling. And I mean, we can unpack that if we want, but bottom line is, back then there was a lot of stigmas associated with that. So I didn't know that. I had to figure things out on my own. Both my parents were working full time and then some to support my brother and I, because now we had 2 separate households. And my world just changed overnight. And it wasn't like I asked for it, right? You feel like, change is a weird thing. And maybe we'll get to change in a minute, because everything's really our relationship with this idea of change and evolution in our own lives. And I definitely felt like change was happening and I didn't want it. It was like Raiders of the Lost Ark, that old Harrison Ford movie where that big cement boulder is chasing him out of that he's running away. And it sort of felt like that. That's how I looked at change. It was these unwanted big obstacles that were going to run you over, whether you liked it or not. So age 9, right? I'm not doing so well. There's a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
And I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. Plus, I didn't know how to talk about it. So I bottled it up. And that stress and that anxiety and that depression that then ensued, I found very quick ways to release it. And it wasn't healthy ways. Okay. So what I started doing very early on was eating my emotions. I realized that if I eat certain types of foods, I'd feel better in the moment. Now, again, it would eventually fade away within just a matter of time, usually within a few hours. And what do I want? I want to eat some more, right? So, and it wasn't like I was reaching for big salad, Samuel. Okay, like I was eating foods that were very, let's just say, very poor in nutrition value, but high in calorie value. And your background's also in the health and wellness industries, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell us, or a nutritionary scientist for that matter, to tell us that if we keep adding more than we need, we're going to start to store that stuff, and within a period of about 5 years, because also one of my pastimes was I was chasing dopamine hits, not through activity, actually through very passive activities, through movies and video games. So that's how I was getting that sort of mental kick, that little bit of satisfaction, that distraction from my life was through movies and video games. And I got that mood enhancement through eating certain unhealthy foods. And that became a very dominant habit in my life. And, again, 5 years of that, it compounds daily, right? It's not like I ate a Big Mac at age 9 and then by, the day later, 24 hours later, I was morbidly obese. It was a 5-year process. But it got to a place where, at 14, almost 15 years old, I'm at the doctor's office with my mom, and, Dr. Quinn pulls my mom out of the office and, of course, leaves the door ajar so I can hear everything they're saying in the hallway. Betty Ann, Dai's morbidly obese. Now, I overheard that, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what morbidly means. I don't know what obese means, but it doesn't sound good. And I knew how I felt already. Everything was hard. It was hard. Climbing. I remember at my school, my homeroom was on the 3rd floor. And I mean, there weren't any elevators in this school. Okay, it's an old school, and so you have to walk up these big flights of stairs every day, up and down. And man, I'd be huffing and puffing, and a little sweat breaking out. Like just the simplest of things were hard. And I'm supposedly like in one of the prime of youth. I'm at 14, 15 years old. And psychologically, there's a lot of other challenges that came with that. And I was dealing with some social anxiety as well, which, it's appeared a few times in my life, but it was really quite aggressive back then. And I just kept trying to self-medicate. And it got to a place where, life was getting really hard. And I'm not going to lie, I was envisioning maybe just be easier not to wake up, be easier not to have to live this. If this is the best it's going to get, I don't think I'm looking forward to the next 50, 60, 70 years of this. And then, it's really weird. Okay. Like, I'm just going to say this as it is, because I think it's the easiest way to deliver it. And I'm hoping people can relate to this, because I think they will when they really think about the biggest changes that we've all navigated. I found myself thinking, and it was actually in this moment when I caught my reflection in the mirror. And I used to always have this little hack where I would have a shower and I'd turn the water on really hot, because the hotter it was, by the time I get out, the mirror would be covered in condensation. Okay. This way I wouldn't have to see my reflection.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and even back then, there's like 2 images of me, 2 photos. Now, thankfully, it's not like today where we have smartphones, high pixel phones in our back pockets. Everyone's got one. I mean, I remember my kids had their first cell phone, at age 11, 12, right? Like it's phenomenal just how accessible the technology is today. And I don't know what I would have done had I lived in that kind of technology, that kind of pressure. And that's why I really feel for kids today. I really do. And so there I was, and I found myself thinking, gosh, it took me 5 years to get to this place. I don't like where I am. I don't like who I am. I'm not enjoying life. I'm not feeling very happy. And I thought, geez, it took me 5 years to get to this place. Well, and I'm at 15, right? I'm just sort of in early high school years, and I'm already thinking about, well, where do I go next when high school is done? I'm like, okay, well, in the next 5 years, when I'm 20, if I haven't changed anything, I keep doing what I'm doing, am I going to be any healthier than I am right now? Hell no. I would, at least I wasn't going to lie to myself anymore.
Yeah.
And I realized that, like, 5 years from now, if I don't change anything, it's not going to be better than it is right now at 15. And this is what happened. To be perfectly honest and transparent, I was more afraid of the idea of not changing than I was of the idea of changing.
Wow.
Now, I think for a lot of us, if we think about those places that we get to where we feel like we've hit rock bottom, and to be fair, I felt like actually I was at rock bottom, but the rock was on top of me, like a little like Atlas, right? And I'm like, I can't move this thing, I'm done, and I should just give up. But that is the easy way out. And fortunately for me, I did have parents that had wonderful work ethics. They were extremely supportive. They wanted to help me, even though every time they tried to help me, I thought, no, you're just saying I'm not good enough the way I am. You're saying that you want me to change. That's how I interpreted it.
Heavy.
That's not what they intended, right? That's not what they meant at all. But it's how I was at that time interpreting it and receiving that message and that support that they were trying to offer. And oh man, it just got to this place where I was like, you know what? I want to make some changes. I can't accept this anymore. I want to be healthy. I remember rushing out of that bathroom after staring at myself in the mirror for a second and having an ugly crying session, like the ugly sobbing, like you're like, thank goodness there's no cameras on me right now because I don't want to look at me, and I got out and I found my dad in the living room. I'm like, Dad, I want to get healthy. And he must have seen something in my eyes that day because he's like, okay, what do you want to do? Like it was like instant. He was like, okay, we got to hit this iron while it's hot, like boom, let's do this. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'd really like a bike. I used to love riding my bike as a kid. Maybe we can get me a bike. He's like, sure, let's do that. We went out, bought me a bike. I started cycling every day. And now the reason why I chose a bike and not going to a gym or that, I was like, I'm not going into a gym, a place with a bunch of mirrors on the walls and equipment I don't know how to use, and a bunch of people that look really fit. And every time they look at me, I think they're judging me, like that is
a common feeling.
Yeah. And I was like, no, I'll do something that I can do very privately, secluded on my own. And I started just cycling every day. Amazing. And I also went to the library. Now my kids, they still say, Dad, why don't you just Google it? I'm like, your dad's older than Google, like how many people can say that? But yes, I'm older than Google. And I went to the library, got books out on nutrition and on mindset and lifestyle and all sorts of stuff. And I just started consuming content and really just trying to educate myself on different ways to start to change my situation.
Amazing.
And what set in motion that day was literally a 20-month journey, maybe a bit longer than that, to release all that weight that I had put on and to create a new lifestyle and a new belief system about myself, more importantly. And so by age 17, I was healthier, I was fitter, I was feeling more confident. I still had a lot of those psychological mental health challenges because I didn't quite shake a lot of that, especially some of that social angst that I experienced, some of the depression that I was experiencing. It was still there, but it wasn't as prevalent. I'd found ways to sort of deal with it, but in a much healthier way. And this is how I'm going to get to the answer on your question, because at age 17, something interesting happened. A friend of my mom's came by the house. This is my mom's place. We lived with my mom, and I'm in the kitchen, like preparing a meal. I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but I was in the kitchen. We had this old porch, and they come around to the back of the house, up on the porch, this old screen door. It was an old Victorian house. My mom loves antiques, and so she always liked these older homes, and she'd do it up like antique style. You kind of feel like you're on Little House on the Prairie meets the Victorian age. It's kind of a weird thing, but it's what she loves, right? So this old screen door, and they're knocking on the door, and I'm like looking at it. I'm like, hey, what's up? My mom's in the back doing some gardening. I'm like, oh, okay. And they just stood there, with this empty sort of stare, but also they weren't leaving to go see my mom. And it was like, okay, this is kind of weird. What's up? What can I do for you? And they're like, well, actually, before we talk to your mom, can I talk to you? I'm like, oh boy, what did I do last weekend? Instantly I'm thinking, here's an adult. Yeah, I'm like, totally. That's exactly where my brain went. My teenage brain was like, oh man, what did I do last weekend? Oh geez, I'm in trouble. Anyway, so they came in, they sat me down, and first thing out of the mouth was they acknowledged me. Wow. They acknowledged the changes they've seen in me over the last 2 years up to that point. how I had just changed everything. I become much more fitter, more engaging, more apt to have conversation, like wanting to hang out at the adult table, like just they saw this shift, this maturity, but also this physical change. And they saw the work that I put in to make that happen. And so it was amazing, because all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, okay, that makes me feel good. I felt seen, I felt acknowledged. And then something magical happened. They said, hey, we'd like to get a little healthier. And he was implying to some of his other family members that they wanted to get healthier. And he was like, do you think you could help? Could you help us, lose some weight, get a little bit healthier?
Love that.
And I was like, at 17 years old, I'm like looking around the room, like, are you talking to me? I felt like a De Niro, right, from Taxi Driver. I was just like, were you talking to me? Because I felt like that. I was just like, wow, this is the first time I feel like I actually have something of value to offer somebody, and I can help somebody. And as soon as I started helping them, I got this wave of fulfillment and happiness and joy. I felt connected. I felt like on purpose. And it was like instant. I was like, you know what? I don't care what I do with the rest of my life. This is going to be a part of it. Right. Helping others with change, specifically in around health. And whether that be mental health, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health. I mean, it's evolved obviously as I've evolved, me too. I'm on the same journey as everybody else. And people still ask, what was your main motivation for the change at 15? I'm like, to be honest, I wanted a girlfriend. Okay. Like, straight up. But now again, I've unpacked that with therapy, and I've worked with a psychologist for a period of time. And I know as I've unpacked that, and my perspective has sort of shifted, I realized what I was ultimately saying is that I was looking for love. I wanted to be loved. I wanted someone to want me for me. Yeah. But the funny thing is I needed to get to a place where I could accept me for me. And as cliche as that sounds, that's really, the last 13 years, I've been finally figuring that part out. I didn't quite figure that out, but anyway, so that's sort of where the origin story, a backstory to what introduced me to coaching and mentorship. And it was, like most of us that work in the space, we've gone through something rather significant in our own lives, and we get out on the other side and we look back and we can't help but seeing people at that starting line that we started off on. And we're like, hey, come on. In fact, we might even go back there and say, listen, I'm going to go part of the journey with you. Let me show you where some of those pitfalls are, those roadblocks that we're going to have to circumvent, let me help you through this.
Yeah.
And that's really it, man. That's what my next 25 some odd years were involved in the wellness industry. Yeah.
All for it. Thank you for sharing. It's so many insights, and it's so interesting to hear that journey. I talk a lot about triggers on this podcast, and majority of people we speak to have a trigger that then started their journey on a different path. For you is obviously, those harsh words, or that honesty of the morbidly obese. It starts you on a different journey. So really interesting. You mentioned about topics that are not normalized. You also mentioned about unhealthy coping methods. So, there's very likely as people listening to this call right now that are either addicted to porn, drugs, food, alcohol, video games, addicted to something, vaping.
All the above, maybe,
right?
It's, totally. Yeah.
So they're probably listening to this and going, oh, I need to change. I need to change. So what is that first step in changing?
Well, you may feel like it starts as a need, but it really becomes quite powerful when it becomes a want. It sort of goes to a different layer, because, there's a lot of aspects where I need this, I need that, and we say this often, but do we really want it? I find when we want it versus need it, it's a subtle shift, but that subtle shift in perspective and understanding and relationship to the idea behind that. Because in wanting something, it also implies that it might require some work. I need this, it's like, and that might imply some work too. But when you accept it and it's like, listen, this is my life. This is, it's that let's just call it accountability, self-accountability to the top level, right? It's like, listen, I know that I can seek help and get support in the changes I want to see happen. But really at the end of the day, this is my journey to take. And I'm the one that's got to live with myself 24/7. For the rest of my life. And this muscle between the ears, might only be 6 inches across, but it's where it all starts, right? It's that belief system, that understanding, that relationship we have to self and how we see ourselves in this world. and not only see ourselves now, but also where do we want to be? It's important to recognize the contrast, because we learn through contrast, right? Like we appreciate the hot because we know we've experienced the cold. We experience what it means to feel satiated after a great meal because we've probably at one point in our lives been hungry or starving. So contrast does give a broader spectrum of colors, let's say, for our lives, and really fills that in. And when I think back on it, this idea of trying to escape or distract ourselves from dealing with whatever the is below the symptoms. And that's where, having someone that has that extra experience or schooling, like I worked with a psychologist, I worked with therapists. I've got no problem with that. Now, I was very apprehensive about it for a big part of my life, but once I got into my 30s and I finally said, you know what, I think this could help me. I think I need to talk to somebody. It wasn't until I got really vulnerable with my wife, though, and opened up about what I was struggling with and got to a place where I was like, you know what, I do need help. And more importantly, I don't just need it, I want it. And that put it in motion, because now I was very much an active participant in my own life, putting certain things in motion, like making the appointments and actually following through on that. And as soon as I started unpacking things, I started realizing, sheesh, I got a few other things here I got to work through. Because let me just say this, at 17, as much as I had developed this new healthy lifestyle, there was still a lot of the mental health stuff I was working through, or to be honest, was sort of burying. And I realized that social angst piece, I didn't really deal with very well. I always believed I was a shy individual. I am naturally introverted, even though I choose to work as an extrovert. Okay. And there's a lot of people that are like me out there, like I'm not out doing stuff all the time. I choose when I'm going to put that activity out there because it drains me so much. But I do it because I chase impact. I want to leave a legacy for my family. I also, on top of that, want to be on my deathbed one day, looking around at all the beautiful people that I admire and love in my life, and be able to say with full integrity, hey guys, I'm on my way out, but at least I'm leaving this place better than it was when I got here, right? Like, and I want to be able to say that, but more than just say it, but believe it and feel it. And that sets a lot of intentionality with the choices that I make every day. I don't live a perfect life by far. I don't think anybody does, but I live a life of intention. And I needed to unpack and work through a lot of problems, because what happened was at 17, 18, I realized, as I was starting to be seen differently from people, which was my intention, right? I wanted to be, because I had a girlfriend now. I started getting invited by some of the cool kids, or people that I believed were the cool kids, to be social with them, because I got this new physique. I got strong. I got much more athletic. Like all of a sudden, people started to take notice. And so it made me feel good, but at the same time, I was really introverted. And then I remember going to my first social setting. And again, it was a social anxiety and the peer pressure. Someone offered me a beer. I took one. I took another. 2, 3 drinks in, I realized, whoa, I feel like a different person. I can talk to anybody, I can be social. Like all of a sudden, all those fears that I was associating in my mind just sort of melted away, and I took on a new persona. And, that became very dominant for me. So I eliminated the food issue, right? And then I replaced it with alcohol. And pretty soon, sometimes when I say S, my Siri picks up. Just a sign that I'm not enunciating my words very well. Siri. And that carried forward for a long time, until I was in my early 30s, around 32, 33, which is partly why my TEDx talk last year came out finally, was to tell that story of how alcohol then played in. But anyway, so I feel very much for people that like to distract dealing with the challenges that they're working through, to the point where maybe they just don't even want to work on them anymore. It's easier just to ignore them and avoid them and hope that they just sort of stop being dominant thoughts in our minds, right? And the one thing I can definitely encourage is that people seek out. Don't be afraid to seek out that extra support. To find a professional to work with. I worked with them. I've also found great coaches and mentors in my life. So I am very grateful for the people that have come into my life, but they've only come in because I let them in. You know what I mean? Like, people don't force their way in saying, I'm going to help you, whether you like it or not. I mean, maybe, that was never my case, but I went out looking for it. And fortunately, there was people on the other end ready and waiting, extending a hand saying, hey, grab it if you need it, and I had the knoweth-all to at least extend my own hand and grab hold, you know? And as much as that sounds like a metaphor, it's not. It's like the legit is what happened,
Yep.
you know? So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
I like what you said when you said, like, you have to put your arm up. You have to raise it first. There was a couple of things that I picked up on here. Is you mentioned about alcohol, arguably the most overused drug or coping mechanism, and the one that's legal, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Wild. And I look at it in a way is that it's almost like a hidden coping mechanism because it's so accepted in our culture.
It's normal.
And for me, I'm not perfect. I'm still working on it. And, you know, especially like binge drinking, I nowhere near drink as much now, but, you know, when I look back 5 years, a lot of alcohol. But if you're drinking every weekend, if you're drinking after work every single day, that's a coping mechanism for conversations you are not having with yourself and with other people.
Right. Oh, well said.
And I spoke with another TEDx talker, an author last week. His name was Jem Fuller, and he wrote a book called The Art of Conscious Communication. There's a quote that came up for me, which is very relative to the same point that you've just covered, and it's super, super interesting. So I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's so many similarities. His quote was, "Your liberation from any personal suffering is yours alone to work on. I'm just saying that opening up and sharing what you're going through is an important part of the healing process." And the reason I want to go through that is you've mentioned a few times about this vulnerability. It's come up at the start of the conversation today, and it came up in your language. So for me, I'm like, okay, vulnerability. Tell me more. Why is vulnerability so important, and especially for men?
Well, obviously, you know, vulnerability, if we go to a textbook definition, right? I know that I have friends that work in IT as an example. You know, the way they define vulnerabilities is very different, right? Again, it relates to the context that we're using the term. But if we're talking about connection, understanding, relatability, empathy, you know, can really seeing eye to eye with somebody, or that idea of walking in someone else's shoes or allowing them to walk in our own. Vulnerability is a piece that's required to be able to communicate that, but to onboard people, to welcome them in with open arms that, hey, I'm struggling here. And, you know, can you relate to this? And you know, I find that a lot of the time when we're vulnerable, we don't have to even ask, do you relate to this? You'll have people around you be like putting up their hands saying, me too. I mean, I look at the Me Too movement. I mean, it's a prime example of vulnerability, you know, and vulnerability to the nth power, because it is leveraging social to get a message out much more quickly. And I mean, I look at all these women that have stepped forward, and now it's others, right? I mean, we talk about the gender neutrality, right? Like it's across the board now. A lot. I mean, gosh, even with Black Lives Matter, right? Like we've seen this amazing influx of people basically saying, hey, this is wrong. This is something I experienced, and I'm sharing my story.
Yeah.
And by being vulnerable, and this is the thing about vulnerability, and I'm speaking from a man who identifies as man and someone that's been around men's groups for many, many years now. It takes someone to go first. Okay. You need someone to be vulnerable first. It's like, think about our relationship with that life partner. Who's going to say, I love you first? Like that is a prime example of vulnerability in our lives every day. You know, is that or going up to that person that we really like, and it's like, you know, hearts beating, sweaty palms, you know, we're like, I want to ask this person out, you know, just for a coffee. I just want to say hi. But that first action, that first letting down that barrier and extending. Now, yes, that too is an act of being vulnerable, because we let down our defenses, our facades for a moment. And it allows others in to see who we really are. Now, as Brene Brown says, not everyone deserves all vulnerability. And vulnerability is not meant for shock and awe, right? If we're saying vulnerability to be like, hey, look at me, and it's an ego play, wrong motivation. You know, there's something else at work there, I would think. And when we're actually using vulnerability as a mask to basically, you know, protect ourselves. under the guise of being vulnerable. And I find that really interesting too. And I don't want to delve into that too much, but rather speak from the other side where it's like, as a man who identifies as a man, I talked at the beginning today, especially about this idea of our brains aren't wired to be happy, but they are wired to learn. And we think about how do we learn in our own lives? Through the mentors that we have, also what's being modeled around us. And I think back to myself in my late teens and well into my 20s, even into my early 30s to some extent. I'm getting into my own business, with a partner, we start scaling. There's lots more pressure on me to perform at a high level because we're building this business. And now I'm being seen as a partner in a company that's growing. We got employees coming on and contractors and new companies we're dealing with. And at the same time, I'm starting to have my kids. Like, there's a lot of pressure, but I'm the strong, confident guy. I'm the guy that goes out and parties with everybody. I'm Fun Guy Dai. That was literally the nickname people had for me, Fun Guy Dai. And pretty soon, you keep putting on this mask, that becomes your dominant face. Mm-hmm. No one really knew who I was and how I was suffering. And I was masking. I was really good at masking it. And I'm only sharing this because I know this is common for a lot of men. Now, I'm not speaking about other genders. I'm, again, speaking as a man who identifies as a man, and what I've observed and experienced in my communities, I can speak to this quite well, and here's the thing though, in our men's groups as an example, we have a question we like to ask to sort of open up the sharing or that part where we get to just talk about what's alive and real for us. We literally ask that question, like, hey guys, what's alive and real for you right now? Who'd like to go first? Anybody want to say anything? And again, we want to talk not just about the good stuff and the great stuff that's happening, but also talk about the challenging stuff. As I say, the good, the bad, and the, it doesn't matter. It's all on the table. But someone's got to go first. And when someone goes first and shows a strong example of being vulnerable, but from a place of strength and a desire of understanding and connection, but more importantly, to say, hey, I might need some help here, or at least some guidance. Yeah. Somebody to share with me something that's worked for them, or what's a habit that you picked up that's helped you through something similar to this, But until we share what we've been experiencing, we don't allow people to help. We just can't, because they don't know what's going on, So it's really funny that way, right? But as soon as one person goes, and I see this at the men's groups, one guy will share. There's an example, actually. So we'd have these groups that we meet every Monday called Mentorship Mondays. Okay. The guys come together for dinner and conversation every Monday night. And we would often have upwards of 20, 24 upwards, a couple dozen guys sitting around a big table. And it was awesome because we'd have, as young as 18 to as old as early 70s. And everything in between. We'd often have many countries represented and continents represented, because at this point in time, I was living in Bali, Indonesia with my family.
Love it.
And so Bali's interesting because, just you get so many people coming to Bali. So we would often have not only Indonesians and expats, but also just people that were visiting. And they'd hear about our men's group and they'd come and they'd hang out, which was awesome because you get so many different perspectives and cultural perspectives as well. Mm-hmm. I remember this one meeting in particular. The 70-year-old guy put up his hand when that question was asked. Across from him, kitty corner, just across and two over, was this young guy, 18, first time ever coming to a men's meeting, right? And he walks into the room, right? And there's like a couple dozen dudes there, and he's like looking around like, what have I just walked into? Because there was only one entrance in and out. Okay. So he's like, I can't just turn around and walk out. They've all just seen me, because we all stopped. We looked at him, we're all sitting around the table just before the meeting starts. So we're all just sort of yammering. A lot of us knew each other really well. And, he's the stranger, the newbie coming in at 18 years old. So I commend him. At 18, I didn't have the know-withal to want to go to something like that. I would have been like, no hell way, I'm not going, that sounds really scary. But he showed up. Yeah. And he stayed and he sat down and he went along with it. And this 70-year-old started to share a story about something that he's been working on for over 40 years. Since he was in his 30s, there was something that he's been struggling with. And it comes and it goes. I won't share what that struggle is. It's as based on the anonymity and the privacy that we have. We always say what happens at Mentorship Monday stays at Mentorship Monday. Right. But what I can say is that as he was sharing, the 18-year-old's eyes, they whitened, they brightened, he was present. Wow. He was hanging on every word the guy was saying. And next, after he finished sharing, We're like, hey, anybody else want to share? The young guy put up his hand. He put up his hand and he started sharing. And it wasn't until after the meeting when Nick and I, Nick's the co-facilitator, so we started Mentorship Mondays together, and we pulled this young guy aside, as we always do. We just talk to people, make sure they're leaving things are not being, they're leaving something incomplete. We want to make sure you're good. And he's like, I feel amazing. I shared something today that I've wanted to share, but I've never shared it with anyone before. Wow. And we're like, how do you feel? And he goes, I feel really good, especially when I saw all the other guys' hands going up to say, hey, me too. Again, we don't want to actually come out and say me too, but we have hand gestures so we don't want to interrupt the person while they're in flow and they're sharing. Because that can be really disruptive. You have somebody else start talking or interjecting, even if they say, oh man, yeah, I get that. Just even that little interruption. And so we recognize hand gestures work a lot better. And so when you see like half the table putting up their hand to say, hey, me too, I've also struggled with that.
Yeah.
The 18-year-old, he said something very interesting. I didn't think anybody would understand what I was going through. I didn't think anybody else had this problem. And you see, this is what vulnerability allows us. When we start to say, yeah, this is what I'm struggling with, we give permission to others to say, hey, you know what? Me too. Or I did struggle with that too. Here's what I did. Here's what helped me. Maybe this will help you. Maybe I can help you. Like we don't even invite that kind of a conversation or opportunity if we don't get vulnerable, open up and share what's alive and real for us right now. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. I can speak really well to this because it's been a tough one for me. It's still 13 years in progress, right? Yeah. But the more I do it, the more comfortable I get with it.
Wow.
And I've also recognized that not everybody deserves the vulnerability that I have, but it's something that's earned. It is a deep sign of trust when someone's vulnerable with you or you are vulnerable with somebody. And it's not something to be taken lightly. But man, it will deepen the connection and that relatability and that understanding. And gosh, it feels good when you don't feel alone in your suffering. So that's vulnerability. That's what I meant by it.
So powerful. I think there's so much value in that. We mentioned the word courage, and there was a person actually that came up for me. His name is Perry Power, and he wrote the book Breaking the Silence, talking about sexual abuse in minors, and was sharing other people's stories. And I was like, anyone who's done anything worthwhile has had that courage to step up and to share and to talk and to communicate and ultimately be vulnerable. Now, that was what came to mind for me. And I love this conversation of talking about the men's group because I don't think it's talked about enough. I don't think there's enough support out there for men. It's becoming a better conversation. And I'm not also saying that we're forgetting about the other side for females. No, but I just want to actively talk about men for this. I'm part of a men's group. I'm in the process. I am leading a men's group, and we're setting one up. And we've got our, first few people in there, and it's been incredible so far. When you reflect on leading the men's group that you have for so long, what are those lessons that you've learned on that journey?
Well, first of all, it's really interesting. But when we were just getting started, so in Bali. Just as an example, have you been to Bali yet, Samuel?
Yes, I have. Okay. Yeah, I was there for a few weeks, climbed
up. Where'd you stay?
It's Canggu? Random villa we had, went to CrossFit Wanderlust and Dave. Awesome.
With Dave and the guys. Yeah, that's great.
What's the volcano called? I can't remember the volcano.
The one that's actually on the island of Bali, up north on that's I can't remember. I want to say Badur. No, not Badur, Badung. No, Batur. Yeah, right above the little the scuba community there.
Correct.
Gosh, I'm drawing a blank already.
4 hours before the volcano erupted.
Wow. Oh, so you were there during that time?
There,
okay, very cool.
4 or 5 years ago, maybe it was, but I have been to Bali. Amazing place.
Oh man, that's amazing. Well, I lived in Canggu, and I did train at CrossFit Wanderlust, but I also trained at Nirvana Strength,
really cool.
Which is actually just down the street, and it's a calisthenics gym. And that's actually in their back, though. They have a beautiful facility, and that's where we would host our men's group.
Really cool.
And my friend Nick was living in Ubud. Now, for those that aren't familiar with Ubud, is more in the interior of Bali. It's really well known if you've ever seen the movie Eat, Play, Love, Julia Roberts movie based on the book. And when she goes to Bali, she spends a good amount of time in Ubud. And it's sort of like that yoga mecca. Okay. And a lot of spirituality emerges from there. And Nick would host men's circles, typically around full moon, which is very common. There's always lots of circles happening around full moons. And I you know, driving an hour to Ubud and an hour back, like it's not like I was opposed to that, but it wasn't part of my regular life, my routine, and it wasn't convenient. So I knew if it wasn't something that was convenient, it wouldn't stick for me, become a regular thing. And I had an idea. I was like, you know what? I want to start a men's group here in Canggu. I want to start a group where we can get together again, dinner and conversation, and no hidden agenda, you know, no cost, just show up. You pay a little bit of money, but that's just to cover your meal for the night. And let's see what happens, you know. And Nick was the first guy I called. I literally called him on WhatsApp. I'm like, hey, Nick, so this is the idea I've got. I'm going to start one of these. And what do you think? And he's like, I'll be there. I'm like, really? You'll just come for the first one? He's like, no, I'll be there every Monday. I was like, okay, well, I guess we're doing this then. And so right from the get-go, we sort of co-facilitated and started through this. And in the early days, though, we didn't have a lot of structure to it. And I think something as men, again, maybe I'm speaking more to myself on this and projecting, but I found that, you know, as men, if we don't have some specific structure, it can get out of hand pretty quick. Okay. Like the conversations start to really become quite fractured, you know, and groups start to emerge and pockets, and it interferes with the uniformity and the flow of a structured meeting. Right. Yeah. And so we realized early on, we have to create some structure for this, create some basic rules of the game, so to speak, you know, and that when we started to implement that, and then we added in the hand gesture component as well, it really started to make things much more cohesive. It flowed better. Yeah. But the thing that was most interesting was we would encourage those that were there, get a commitment if they were coming back the following week, right then and there. Some of them wouldn't because they were only in Bali for a short period of time or they were traveling, but those that could would. But we'd always encourage them, hey, when you're out there and experiencing life for the next week, remember how you're feeling right now, because we would always close with, hey, you know, what's your biggest takeaway from tonight, from being here? It was always positive, always. It's like, man, I feel more connected. I feel, you know, I feel better, you know, than I was when I got here. And we're like, remember that feeling. Remember what you were able to achieve by being here around other men that are on the same wavelength with you, wanting to improve and not afraid to open up and talk about the areas we need to improve. And we invite you to invite one more. Bring somebody. Yeah. You know, bring someone next meeting. Bring another man. Just have them come as a guest. Check it out. You know, there's no agenda here. It's just introduce them to what could be. And it started to grow very quickly. You know, guys would just be talking about it. Like I was also the president of the Toastmasters Club in Canggu as well. And so every other week I'd be having Toastmasters meeting. There'd always be a good assortment of new guys there. And I'd always go up to the guys, welcome to the Toastmasters. But I also, you know, by the end of the meeting, I would go around and say, hey, I also have another group that I run.
Love that.
For men only. Here's what it is. You want to come hang out and check it out, meet some other cool guys. Inevitably, it was always a positive yes. And so all we can do is extend a hand and invite. That's it. You know, and I find that's the most effective way with other men to get them to commit. I found that if I sent private messages or DMs, sometimes they'd show up. Yeah. But if it was a face-to-face or a personal conversation, almost always showed up. So just something to keep in mind. Yeah. You know, because there's that personal aspect that, you know, I love social media and the convenience it creates, and also how it brings the world in. I mean, look at you and I, Samuel. How did we connect? Yeah. Right? Like we have a mutual connection, but through this platform, you're I mean, on the other side of the ocean. Okay. Like,
a long way away.
So I'm not against technology and social, but I do recognize it also has its limits.
Yes.
And there's something that's very different when we have this kind of a intimate connection through a personal live conversation. And I find that because of the intimacy that's by nature in a men's group or a women's group or, you know, a group or a circle period, it's nice to have that kind of level of invitation, you know, and because when I try to do it the other way, and Nick can attest to this too, is just the results weren't as good. We just found that the attendance wouldn't be as good, you know, and our goal is just to introduce men to the conversation. That was it.
Yeah. That's cool.
And as they started to open up to it, man, it was just wild to see these guys go off. And because you end up connecting with these guys, they go off into their home countries and wherever they end up again, but you end up staying connected on social. But to see what those initial conversations and experiences at that Mentorship Monday meeting and how it's trickled over into their lives now, where they are and how they're impacting others in their communities, it's really inspiring to see. So there's something to this. And I'm not saying Mentorship Monday is a solution. Of course not. I mean, Samuel, you're starting a men's group. It is one of the solutions. Just the fact that we're creating a safe space for men to come and practice being vulnerable with one another without the fear of that being used against them, being taken out of context. And it's just a wonderful, safe place to practice, developing this skill that we all agree it would be nice to be able to be more vulnerable.
Yeah.
We know that. As a father of 2 girls, I'll tell you, it's made my relationship with my kids much more sound. It's also helped my wife and I endure. I mean, I've been dating her for 22, almost 23 years now, and we've had our challenges, but in the last 13 years was a lot better than the first 10.
Amazing.
And it's because of a lot of these changes,
Yep. All for it. There was so much of that I loved. You mentioned about structure and how guys need structure. So I'd love to learn about some frameworks or practices that you consistently use to help and serve those men. But before we delve into that, I want to just express my gratitude for you in being so open in talking about these topics and these difficult things, because again, it's not talked about enough. And for me, those men's groups, in my previous background, I was health and fitness. That was all I was. And then I was business, and that was all I was. And these men's groups now have allowed me to broaden my coaching horizons, but help people not just in business, not just in their personal health and fitness, but now also in their relationships, their life, and a more holistic approach. And the results of that have been astounding because it's now the full picture. So that's been amazing. So again, thank you for sharing. So
thank you.
I'd love to ask you again, is there any particular frameworks or practices that you're just a massive fan of, or that you use to help coach men to become their best self?
Well, thanks for asking. Things have shifted for me. All right. Like, obviously I'm in my mid 40s now. It's different than it was 10 years ago. It's different than it was 20 years ago. Right. Yeah. But I am happy to say, from a health perspective, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, I'm in the best place I've ever been.
Yes. Let's go.
Physically fitter than I'd ever been. I outperform what I used to do in my mid 30s, especially in my mid 20s. In my mid 30s, I was competing in CrossFit, and I'm like fitter now, and I don't compete anymore, but I've tweaked how I train because of also I was aging, and I've recognized I'm more interested in longevity along with vitality than I am about getting a new PR. Okay. Or a personal best.
Yeah.
It just, again, my focus has changed. And I think it's important to recognize, where are we at? And that's the sort of the question that we have to address first. Is everyone's starting someplace different typically, and it's very relative to the individual and the life that they've led to that moment in time. But it's important to recognize, okay, I'm going to draw this line in the sand now and move forward. What's the vision for my life that I want to pursue?
Yeah.
We have to create space for that, to envision, to introspect, right? To reflect. And I know for myself, I struggle with creating the space to have those kind of conversations. And you alluded to this before, Samuel, when you said, it's that, are we asking the right questions of ourselves? Right? What questions are we asking, especially when we're by ourselves? Or are we looking to distract ourselves from those questions by doing things that just chew up time?
Yeah.
And attention. Netflix and chill is a prime example. And I'm the first and foremost to admit, I've had my moments, when my depression kicks in and I'm feeling anxious. It's so interesting, right? I know that taking immediate action and doing certain things will lessen that feeling, but sometimes I just say, forget it. And I take the path of least resistance, and I will veg on the couch, binge on a session of some TV series, and I'm avoiding dealing with whatever it is that's causing it. I recognize this in me, and I can honestly say that it doesn't happen as frequently as it used to because of the work I've done, but it's still there. And I want to preface with this first, because it's not a matter of trying to eliminate this stuff. It's really plugging in and recognizing we all have resiliency in our DNA. Okay? As a species, we're really good at enduring and evolving. I mean, look at us, 8 billion of us on this planet. Yeah, climate change experts might say we're a bit too resilient, but regardless, we're pretty darn good at enduring and surviving the suffering, you know, and when we recognize that that skill's in us, developing resiliency is amazing because it allows us to bounce back on those down days. And what used to be for me a down week, sometimes a down month, it's now a down day or two. You know, I bounce back more quickly. And this is why I want to preface with that is anybody who's listening to this, I don't care your gender, your life story. Like, I know it's all relative to your experience, but recognize you are resilient. Okay. And just work on the bounce back. Don't worry about, I got to deal with this. So I avoid my down moments because you're going to have them.
Yeah.
It's a given. You're going to have them. It's inevitable. If you're living a life worth living, you're going to experience it. Okay. Like you just will. It's true, right? Like if you're out there living a life and engaged in your own life, you're going to have down moments. You're going to have sad moments. You're going to have moments of suffering, but you don't have to stay there. And that doesn't have to be your normal. And based on that, you know, there's definitely some philosophies, if you will, or as I like to say, more like a process to align with. And I invite anybody and everybody, whatever process you end up adopting or accepting, just remember you have to commit to it consistently and frequently enough to actually see the change through. See the significance of the impact made through your actions. If you try things one time and it doesn't work, whose fault is that? You know, I think we can all admit, it's like, if I go to the gym and I have one workout, oh my gosh, I'm still 20 pounds overweight. What happened? I feel ripped off. I want my money back, you know, like, or you go to McDonald's and you eat one Big Mac and you die of a heart attack an hour later. I mean, maybe we would look at fast food differently, right? But we have to recognize things compound over time, positively and negatively. So it's those little micro deposits that we make every day will ultimately help create our life. You know, the little experiences every day, intentional or not. And from that, I like to invite people, especially men, to prioritize mental health first. I can appreciate that we all look in the mirror and we think about all the things that we'd like to see changed, at least in what we're seeing on the surface. And it's easy to presume that if we change the outside package, that the inside's going to change too. But unfortunately, and I can speak from a lot of experience over 20 plus years of dealing with this, okay, personally, and also helping others through it. It doesn't matter what you do on the outside. If the inside's not getting focused attention, it's all for naught. Because you can turn yourself into the fittest person on the planet. You know, you can be 17 years old, go from being morbidly obese and lose all that weight and get healthy and thriving and have the attention of your peers. But it doesn't mean you're going to think better of yourself. You know, and I hate to be that guy, but it's true. And I think shifting our attention to prioritize mental health and our self-perspective is where things need to begin. Now, in conjunction with that onset, introducing a regular fitness practice is wonderful because you want to see your health change. You want to see hormones start to regulate a bit more effectively. You want to see yourself manage blood sugar and energy more effectively in your life. Fitness is like a direct conduit to make an impact in those areas. And I encourage fitness as well. Working out minimally 15 minutes a day. And some people are like, wow, that's not very much. I'm like, no, it's not. But if that's more than you're doing right now, that will be plenty. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and one of my favorite things, and this is sort of around the 5S, which we might want to touch on, but is I have this idea called the power 30, you know, and I refer to 30 minutes, or I also refer to it as the 2% solution. Nice. And what I mean by that is, well, 30 minutes a day is 2% of your 24 hours. Not very much. And in this effort to try to support people where they're at, I invite them to commit for 28 days, 30 minutes a day. So just 2% of your next 28 days, you're going to commit and make a non-negotiable to prioritize yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally. And what I invite you to do is with that 30 minutes, you block it in on your calendar every single day for 28 days straight. The first 15 minutes is moving your body with purpose. This is to elicit a positive response or a positive adaptation. See, some stress is good stress. Darwin will tell us, right, in his research that it's amazing, but all these stressful environments have led to the fittest survive. those that are most resilient survive and adapt and continue to flourish. Well, we're no different as an organism, right? It's just that we've got a lot more comforts in our developed countries and we've automated and systematized a lot of this stuff, right? But 15 minutes of movement with purpose. So to get the heart rate elevated, get a little sweat on, work your body, your muscles, right? To feel like you've done something productive for your physicality. To remind you that you are someone in your own skin. And yes, it feels good to move that body. As soon as you're done the 15-minute workout, and it's all body weight, calisthenics based. Don't even worry about equipment. You can put a towel down on the ground. You can do a workout.
Brilliant.
5 minutes of mindful meditation. Just 5 minutes. Not very much. But now I find it's really easy to tap into meditation, or at least focusing on your breath after a workout.
Yes.
Very much so. Yeah, you bring the heart rate down. You're also able to just focus on the heart rate, focus on the breath to try to bring yourself back to a state of calm. But you're extremely present to that feeling in your body. And I think it's a great place to begin, especially if you're just starting out with meditation and you're averse to it. Like I struggle to meditate. You get me to sit down anywhere. I mean, I've been sitting here for a bit now, and that's impressive, but I am a little fidgety, I move a little bit. Why? Because that's just who I am. All right. So if you're trying to get me to sit still and meditate, yikes. I find I'm less resistant to it and more capable of it when I do it after a workout. Or right before bed.
Makes sense.
And so that's 20 of the 30 minutes. The last 10 minutes is about injecting into your mind and soul and body some solid personal development.
Strong.
So listening to a wonderful podcast like this, reading an inspiring book, watching a TED Talk, having an uplifting conversation with a coach or a mentor in your life, that could also factor in. But I'm not saying hours on end, but just 10 minutes of focusing on feeding that muscle between the ears, something uplifting, empowering, inspiring. Because if we let media do that for us, let's be honest, most of what we see out there is not necessarily positive.
No.
And if that's what's filling your mind, you got to wonder, because whatever goes in is going to come out.
Yeah, 100%.
And through our actions, through our beliefs, through our conversation, through how we show up, So I invite people to really be protective of that. Be protective of the inputs. But this is a wonderful way to just start, to set a foundation and to create some habits that feed not only the physicality, but also our mentality and our emotional state. And so it's just 2% of every day for 28 days. And at the end of that, I've never had anybody come back to me and say,
doesn't work.
Yeah. I've never had that. I wrote the book, legitimately wrote the book, the Whole Life Fitness Manifesto. This is going back 5-6 years now. And I give this program in the whole book. And I've never had anybody reach out and say, you know what, this is garbage. This doesn't work. I've had people say, okay, well, I've done the 30 minutes, but I want to do more. And I'm like, great, awesome. What do you want to do next? Well, I've always wanted to do a marathon. I'm like, get on it. I'm like, do it, because that confidence in oneself increases at the same time. Our confidence, our clarity of our life. When we feel clear and you feel confident, you procrastinate less and you take more decisive action.
Yeah, so powerful.
It's simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
Never is.
Because you still got to start and you got to keep up with it. But I find that committing 2% of every 24 hours, just 30 minutes a day, every once in a while I get people that push back on this, Samuel. And I'm like, hey, do you have a smartphone? They're like, yeah. I'm like, great. They got this little thing. Is it an iPhone by the chance? And it's an iPhone. I'm like, there's a really cool thing in the settings here that will tell us every 24 hours how much time you spend on your phone and on what apps.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I'm like, yeah. Do you mind pulling this up for me right now? And then I'm like, so tell me, how's your days typically look? And like, oh my gosh, I'm on Instagram like an hour a day. Great. What else? I'm checking email 40 minutes a day. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm on this. I'm on that. I'm like, I'm on my phone like 6 hours a day. I'm like, do you think you could take 30 minutes away from that?
So, like you say, so simple, such a great framework because of that simplicity. But like you say, it's just not easy to implement, and it's really cool. And I can see how that framework can work for so many people too. And I love the term 2%. Was it 2% solution? Was it?
Yeah, the 2% solution.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I'm a bit of a copywriter too, so I like that.
You've done a TEDx talk. You wrote the book, leader of a men's group. I know that you've been on many podcasts. We've got a lot of connections or similar mutual connections, I suppose. What are you focusing on at the moment?
Ah, thanks for asking. Well, if I'm perfectly honest, my mental health the last few months, I've realized I don't do so well in the wintertime.
Hmm.
And I've
Yeah,
become much more sensitive to that after we were traveling for 5 years. And much of those 5 years are spent in
yeah,
much sunnier climates, longer days. So I'm definitely someone that's affected by SADS, or
yeah.
seasonal affectiveness
Yeah.
disorder.
It's common.
It is very common, but I never really appreciated it. But this season's been really hard for me. I'm not
Yeah.
going to lie. The last 2 months, I've been struggling,
Yeah.
and just struggling with motivation.
Hmm.
And I like to, I'm happy to say, I've engaged with a therapist again. I haven't had a therapist for many years, but I felt I just needed a third party to talk to,
Good.
just sort of chat through some of the things that are going on in my head. I've recognized sometimes you just got to talk it out, just to get that clarity.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I've started to realize, there's some subtle things that I can start to do. And in the last couple of weeks, it's been a very different story.
Yeah.
My routines are back. I'm feeling much more connected to my life, much more
Brilliant.
present. Also supplementing, and I even started going to the tanning beds once a week, just to give me some extra vitamin D, and all of it's working really well.
Amazing.
But it's, again, I have to choose to commit my time to do those actions. If I don't, you'll just find me on the couch.
Yeah.
To be honest, that's just the truth.
Again, it's so valuable, and it shows the person you are that you feel comfortable in sharing, that information. It's so important for other people that are listening of, you have to also raise your own hand, right? You recognized you had that honesty with yourself to be like, wait a minute, something's not quite right. Let me address that. We can't just hide that voice. You can't just keep turning it off. You have to address it. So I think there's a lot of credit to you there to talk about it. And SAD is very, very common. It's come up a few times for me in these podcasts, and we delve into some of these more difficult topics. They are, and that's been a lesson for me, is how common that is SAD. And it's something that's, again, probably not talked about enough. Just super.
I don't think so. To be honest, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm now taking 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 a day.
Yeah,
and I know some people are probably like, I'm that, and a couple other supplements. I work at the functional medicine practice because I also live with the chronic autoimmune disease. I realized I didn't bring that up, but about 10 years ago, got diagnosed with a autoimmune neutropenia, which means I have no neutrophils. Neutrophils is what your bone marrow cranks out to protect you against viral infections and bacterial infections. So we can imagine the last couple of years. I know my hematologist is like, hey, don't worry about the pandemic. Just live in a bubble. I'm like, live in a bubble? Can you see me doing burpees in a bubble? I don't think so, So, but I have to admit, though, the last couple of years during the pandemic was challenging as well, because I did limit a lot of my social interactions in real life, based on some concerns with my immune system, and that compromised position that I'm in. So I am glad the world's opening up again. My health is good. Now I'm just working on the mental health to get that back in alignment too. But it's to be fair, last summer, actually it would be a year ago this past summer, I made that subtle shift to prioritizing mental health above all else.
Love that.
And I did things that made me feel good and made me feel proud about my choices. And that's all I did for literally the whole summer, just over a year ago.
Amazing.
And in those 3 months, from June, July, August, everything changed. I got back to me feeling like me again.
Love to hear it.
Yeah. So anyways, it's like, I just hope anybody that's listening to this or watching, you're not alone. We all have these struggles, and we don't have to struggle alone, because alone and loneliness is just one choice difference. It's just a single choice to change that. And you'll be amazed at how many people are out there with the hand extended, waiting for us. Just to say, hey, I could use some help here. I could use some support. And that's just, again, to sort of close the loop on that the whole idea of a men's group. Like, if you're a man and you're looking to connect with other men, but in a much more positive and effective and growth oriented way, find a men's group, reach out to Samuel, connect with them. If you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to have a conversation on it too.
Yeah, I fully agree. Couldn't agree more. I think we've covered so many different topics today.
We have.
I want to fully express my gratitude. But you talk about vulnerability, but you actually show it. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of credit there. You've clearly lived a very full life as well. And you bring a lot of wisdom to the table, which is absolutely amazing. I have two final questions ready.
Yeah, sure.
Number one is a question that I ask every single person that comes on my show. And that question is, what advice would your future self give you in this current moment?
Say that one more time.
What advice would your
Yeah.
future self give you in this current moment?
My future self give me. I love that because it's usually the other way around. And that's why I had to ask for you to say that again. I was like, did I hear that right? So
Confronting.
thank you. I like that. I really like that. It's you make me think now. Well, I often think, okay, so this is interesting. I'm going to sort of let you in on this. Like, so as I mentioned, my daughters are almost 18 and 20. And so my youngest is just finishing high school. My eldest is in second year in university, and both are still living at home, which is wonderful. But my eldest is moving out in January, to move in with her boyfriend. And so it's like, whoa, this is wow. So, and my youngest is the last year of high school, and she's already shared that, she's into possibly doing some travel next year, taking a gap year, which I'm excited for as well. But it's made me start thinking about life without kids again, at least, as our 24/7 responsibility. Yeah. And so I've started to think about my future a lot more in that regards, but also about them. And in particular, when they start having kids of their own, and I find myself being a grandparent. And I often think, like, what are the lessons I'd like to be able to impart on my grandkids that maybe I wasn't able to impart on my own kids? And so this is really case in point to this question. What I've been thinking about a lot lately is, can I be the kind of guy that, listen, the first 10 years of my kids' lives, maybe not the first 10, let's say the first 7 of my eldest, first 5 of my youngest, I was busy scaling a company. Not, and I know I'm using this as an excuse, but I wasn't as engaged in their life as I could have been. Also, I was drinking a lot.
Yeah.
And that also led me to not being very engaged with their life. I don't want to miss those moments again. It's been 13 years since I had a drink. I don't even think about it. I'm not no problem being around it. I'm a very different person because of that now. But I want to be my full self. I really want to be able to be vulnerable with my kids and have proper adult conversations with them as they're coming into adulthood. And so that's the piece of advice I give myself, is to keep practicing being vulnerable, especially with my girls, because it's going to allow me to be a better parent to them, a better grandparent in the future, but also a better community leader and just friend.
Yeah.
And that's really my focus right now, is continuing to practice that, because had I adopted this 20 years ago, this practice of just trying to become more comfortable with this idea of opening up, I often wonder, where would my life be today? So that's where I'm thinking, like, 20 years from now, where will it be if I just keep doing what I'm doing now? And I'm actually really optimistic about it. Okay. Yeah. Like I feel good. But it's just a nice reminder to keep doing what I'm doing,
right.
Keep making those little deposits every day, trying to bring down those barriers so I can deeper the connection and understanding between me, my kids, my friends, my communities. Just keep practicing being vulnerable and not worry about the outliers that might take advantage of that vulnerability, because it does happen. And I know that's a concern we all have, but I'm willing to take that risk,
Love that. My takeaway from that was, be your best self so that you can be the best father and then never miss a moment again.
Yeah. And I would say that's pretty much the life that we've had the last decade. So, I feel really proud about that. And, but I plan to keep that, it's one of my core values. I don't compromise on family.
Love that. All for it. Yeah. All for it. Dai, this has been so much fun. I've taken away loads personally as well. All of your links to socials are going to be down below. But where would be the best place for someone to come and connect, learn more about you? Where would be the best place for them to go?
Well, I'm a social guy. I like connecting with people just for conversations, and whether it be online or in real life. But I always say, excuse me, if you're online and you're active online, I'm most active on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Cool.
So I always say, start there first, shoot me a message, or comment on a post. Don't be shy. Say, hey, I heard you and Samuel talking about vulnerability. Here's my take on it.
Love that.
Here's my experience with it. Like, that's a great place for us to start. And because you know what, we're all in this together. We are,
Yeah.
whether we admit it or not, man, we're all moving in the same direction, and that's forward. So I know we can go a lot further when we go together. And as the old African proverb goes, you know, if you want to go far, go together. You want to go fast, go on your own, right? But I don't know. I want to go far, and I'd rather go together. So
Yeah.
yeah, there we go.
Amazing. Amazing. Dai, thank you for showing up with the energy, the vulnerability, and it's refreshing to see someone so passionate about what they do. So thank you for sharing your time, your value, your knowledge with us today. It's been an amazing, amazing episode, and I'm looking forward to what's to come.
Likewise, Samuel. Thank you for creating a space like this where we can all be flies on the wall to hear these types of conversations, and for you just creating a space where it's safe to have these conversations, because man, the world needs more of that.
Yeah.
So thank you for offsetting that negativity scale that we see in the media today. And the more people like you creating positive, we're going to shift the global perspective on this. I really do believe that. And I think it's already happening. You know, the scale is tipping. And I just want to say thank you for leading the charge. You know, it's really amazing to see.
My name is Samuel Main, and I truly hope that you've got value from today's video. If you have, please do hit like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow.